So let me go back to Toyin before I go back now to the last question where each of you will give us something. But Toyin, this question is asking, what are the two key enabling factors in economic policy development and formulation that would contribute to the realization of the aspirations of Agenda 2063 and 2030, Agenda 2030? It feels like that's a question that can also be addressed to me, but I think it's good to hear a private sector perspective on what you see to be two key enabling factors in economic policy development and formulation that would contribute to the realization of these two great agendas.
Yes. So my quick answer, I'm going to give a short answer and a more a lengthy answer. The short answer is bring private sector to the room, to the table, as the policies are being crafted and designed. They are the ones to implement it. They are the ones to execute it. So they need to be a part of that decision making. That's my short answer. But my long answer is really, just to share a little bit about my background, what drives the work I do, and how we do this work. My background is serving in the world's largest company, Walmart headquarters, working in merchandising, working in global sourcing, the decision-making process that the world's biggest buyer makes before they decide where they're going to buy, okay? And within the context of that global framework, what became evident to me was we weren't seeing Africa's private sector emerging on the landscape. Meaning, as the global decision-making process is being made, we weren't seeing the private sector coming to the table to declare, this is what I want to sell, this is what we want to buy. Not at the global level and the scale that I was part of. And that is what motivates me to do all of this work, because what we have seen on our platform is transformation. When we provide market linkages for private sector, be it small business or large businesses on the continent, when we connect them to the market, magic happens. We have, for example, members from northern Nigeria where there's conflict today. We have members that have shipped face masks to the US market through market connectivity and training and coaching and hand-holding. That is the practical side of policy implementation in the private sector, is making sure that we're building capacity, but we're also hand-holding the businesses and connecting them to market within the context of the AFCFTA. This is what I want to say. The AFCFTA has systematically created a huge, in an artificial way, it has created a huge demand for made in Africa. What this means in the private sector is you now have almost an assurance that there is a new demand for what it is you're producing, which then allows you to go into the trade financing institution. Because when you think about the cycle of trade development, you want demand, you want capacity building, you also need trade financing, because if there is demand and you want to build capacity, you need somebody to finance you. So those are the players that we do bring together. But one of the other things that personally gives me concern and means the reason I play a more active role when it comes to AFCFTA is because I've seen a somewhat similar policy like the African Growth and Opportunity Act that was created by the United States government. It has been on the books for 20 years, but as of today, we still find that we have to educate people. So education is key. We have to educate people. We have to mobilize the private sector to now use the AFCFTA. Because having amazing policy is fantastic, but the private sector must be mobilized. And the other conversation finally that I have within the private sector is to inspire them and to encourage them to go out there and fish. Because sometimes we find that the private sector sits back, sometimes expecting that the information and knowledge and education that they need to sustain their business will come and meet them. So I coach the people I coach. I also teach them how to understand what the AFCFTA is, What does it mean to their business? How can they leverage it? How can they start building partnerships beyond their own borders to actually lift this up and build prosperity for the people in their community through job creation?
No, thank you so much, Toyin. We have two very accomplished policymakers with us here and diplomats also, Ambassador Wolf and Ambassador Muchanga. And the interesting thing is the connection between what you're saying about private sector and what they are saying. And I think this question of the private sector in Africa, I think we've not paid enough attention to it. And I think the way you have said that the AFCFTA has provided the demand, and what we need to do is actually to grow that capacity of our private sector to take, because they are assured of the market. And you have Afrexim Bank and even other financing institutions that are there because they know there is a market. So the risk of not being able to get money paid back is actually lessened, lowered by the existence of a market that actually has continental rules. So no, thank you very much for responding to that question in the way you have responded to it. So now we are going now to the final leg. And I think this one, basically what I have before me is just to ask each one of you. And I think now we will start, no, I think we start again with Ambassador Wolf so that you don't take the floor again immediately after. Yeah, so it's to ask each one of you to think of some action-oriented recommendation that on how African governments, specifically those in the context of conflict, could utilize the frameworks and tools at their disposal to harness trade towards achieving sustainable peace and security outcomes. It's actually a loaded question, I must say. How can African governments, specifically those in contexts of conflict, or maybe risk of conflict, utilize the frameworks and tools at their disposal to harness trade towards achieving sustainable peace and security outcomes? So DDG Wolf, I'll let you go first. I know you gave us the example of Liberia, Yemen, and yeah, so, but let's hear what you would want to say on this.
Well, thank you very much. What we're looking for is synergy. We have a series of communities that are really engaged in trying to help conflict-affected and fragile economies. We can do more together. So the Trade for Peace program is trying to bring together the communities of trade, peace, and the humanitarian workers, and see what we can do to elevate the development of assistance that's needed for the countries that are in this condition. In the WTO, it's about the accessions division. It's about bringing more technical assistance to the countries in the process of accession. There's a lot of domestic reform that has to take place in order to join the WTO. Albert Muchanga and I were in Addis Ababa, and there was a lot of optimism a year ago when we were there about the domestic program. And we talked about how it keyed into the international rules and joining the integration into the world economy, as well as integration across the African continent. The whole idea of a free trade agreement, theoretically, was not just to help those who are members of it, but to help the whole world by generating more trade creation than there would be trade diversion from lowering barriers on less than an equal basis for all. What are we doing in the Trade for Peace program? We have an annual Trade for Peace Week, which elevates the issue. We create a platform and a Trade for Peace network to compare notes, to see what we can do with each other. We develop a white paper for Trade for Peace and development of training materials, modules for Trade for Peace, and now podcasts. It's a small effort, but it can have big returns if we concentrate on, we look at the exceeding countries from our point of view in this organization. The fact is, everybody wants to help. And can we help more efficiently? That's why Afghanistan and Liberia and others at the WTO are very active in reaching out to help those who have not yet joined, who've not gone through the process of domestic reforms, and telling them there is light at the end of the tunnel, is going to be better, and it is getting better. For those who have acceded to the WTO, in every case, there has been real improvement in their economic performance. And that means now increasingly, we talked about youth employment and the employment of women at a better level than has taken place in the past. So we plan to include the CFTA in our research and our outreach. One early activity will be for the implementation of the Continental Free Trade Agreement. It's going to be in our outreach, in our podcast, but also through the 4th Regional Dialogue on WTO Accessions for Africa, which will be hosted by the government of Sudan this year. Africa is a focus for the WTO now. It's not just because Dr. Ngozi joined us, but it certainly does help to elevate the issue of development in Africa, to have her at the head of this organization. So we're trying to bring these things, these different strands together. What can African countries do? What can the governments do? Participate. We should get past repeating positions in this organization, the WTO, and move towards practical solutions. Africa needs to be a full participant in the world of digital commerce. It's you talk about innovation earlier. A number of points were made with respect to innovation. Africa has to be a full participant in not only the digital commerce for industry, but the digital commerce for commerce for both services and goods for agriculture. I mean, Africa has a lot of potential in Africa. It can be far more efficient, but the FAO, we and others are working on bringing the digital economy to the African experience. I'll stop there and go to the others' remarks.
No, thank you. I think it's clear. The point is well clear of what the African governments can do. So, Ambassador Muchanga, what do you think of this question?
It's a very good question. I'll answer it in the context of African economic integration. The first answer may not be very pleasant because it's not a very popular topic. And this is the issue of free movement of people, right of residence, and right of establishment. All African governments must commit to that. Because when we do that, we create a common identity. And when we do that, we also make it possible for those Africans who are very well educated to go and settle in another African country where the skills are needed. Right now, restrictions on the free movement of people, right of residence, right of establishment, and the mutual recognition of academic qualifications is one of the biggest non-tariff barriers in intra-African trade. But at the political level, it destroys the spirit of a common identity. If we have a common identity, it's very difficult to fight against each other. A time must come when somebody will not call themselves a Zambian. They should call themselves an African. When a Kenyan was not say, I'm a Kenyan, I'm an African. And similarly for all other nationalities. So that's the first key issue. And with the protocol on free movement of people, right of residence, and the right of establishment, we call upon the African governments to ratify it as a matter of urgency, because we cannot build one African market without common identity. The second one is the process of inclusivity in the African continental free trade area. It should be a project of win-win outcomes. And to this end, we, at the level of the African Union Commission, we have teamed up with the United Nations Industrial Development Organization to undertake a very comprehensive regional value chain mapping exercise covering all the 55 African countries. And the objective is to find out the endowments and comparative advantages of each country. And from there, we can promote investments and make it possible for each and every African country to export to the rest of Africa either finished or intermediate goods. When there's that inclusivity in the African continental free trade area, there will be ownership of the process by each and every African country and government. And when there's that mutual ownership, it's very, very difficult to have situations of war. That's how I would answer that question. Thank you.
Thank you. Very, very practical. So, Toyin, we are coming to the end of the session.
Yes, yes. So for us, the Trade with Africa framework we developed actually highlights investment focus areas to accelerate growth and development. So for example, we highlight the agriculture value chain, manufacturing, retail, digital, physical, infrastructure development, having enabling policies and fiscal responsibility underpinned by the right level of education for the youth, technology, security, healthcare, human capacity development. These are all areas that I believe each government must pay attention to if they want to remain relevant in the future. The journey to achieving this is long. However, we can focus on laying the solid foundation today that will secure the future of Africa for generations to come. Also, what I want to highlight is that the real currency of trade is actually trust in the private sector. We must find ways to build trust back into the African systems, whether within ourselves or even beyond Africa with the rest of the world. We need to continue to design enabling policies that protects the investments. And we also need to accelerate the adoption of technology for sustained economic growth. I believe this is a perfect time for Africa to leapfrog ahead of the rest of the world. We do not need to recreate other people's past when we can actually create the future of the world for the rest of the world. But in order to do this successfully, we must innovate. But let me leave you with a new phrase I just developed to explain what it takes to innovate. There's no innovation without collaboration, and there's no collaboration without association. And there's no association without relation. And there's no relation without trust. When we trust people, we relate with one another. Once we relate with one another, we bring ourselves in association. Once we're in association with one another, we then start to collaborate. And when we start to collaborate, we start seeing new ways of working. We start implementing new ideas, and that's how we innovate. So let us rebuild trust in the system, because that's the foundation to accelerate trade and achieve our goals. And together, we can build the Africa that we want. God bless you. And I thank you again for this opportunity. Over to you, Dr. Stephen. Thank you.
No, thank you. Thank you very much. And actually, on that note, I had been asked by the Aswan Forum Secretariat to think of some takeaways. I believe what I would want to say is the following, because I think we are running out of time. We have run out of time. I think the case has been made. It's not even just a case. We have been able to demonstrate clearly through our interventions that trade does actually contribute to peace and security. There are different channels that it does that, either by raising the costs of conflict, or just by the fact that it creates prosperity. And if this prosperity is inclusive, you don't have a situation whereby people would want to go to war. Now, there are some very clear actions, recommendations that have also come from here. I think I like this one of we have to ratify the protocol on the free movement of people, a right of residence and establishment, because again, it's when I identify you as my sister and as my brother and as family that it becomes easier for us to resolve our problems rather than seeing you in a different light. So if we can have this common identity, it will not only facilitate the trade, but it is also going to make us be much more open. I also like the idea, another takeaway that I get from here is that I think we have to participate in the conversations. And I think this is the idea from you, Ambassador Wolf, that we need to participate and exploit the synergies that exist between us, because we'll also be able to share experiences, even with people who are from outside Africa, who have been where we are, and the role that trade has played. And the idea of trust, I think, is at the heart. And I think the trust also comes with identity also. So the idea of trust is also very critical to making people be able to openly trade with each other without any mistrust, because they don't think that you're doing it by cutting corners. You're basically playing by the rules of the AFCFTA or the WTO rules. So I think this is another takeaway that we can take away from here. But there are quite a number of points that that you have made as panelists, and I really want to thank each and every one of you. It has been a privilege to moderate the session, and I really want to thank the Aswan Forum for giving all of us the opportunity to be able to put across the views and the points and the recommendations that have come from you. So with this, we bring to the end our session, and hope we'll get another opportunity to interact once again, especially with you, Toyin, because we always interact with Ambassador Muchanga and Ambassador Alan. So it's basically you that we need to connect even more. So thank you very much, and back to you, Nur. So I take it that this brings us to the end of the session. Thank you.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Bye, sir. Thank you so
Nice
much.
interacting with you. Bye.
God bless you, sir.
Bye.
God bless you also. Bye.